Hello, lovely people. I'm so glad to come to you once again with the Eden Project with Priscilla. Today, we are privileged to have with us a very wonderful woman. I wouldn't want to introduce her. I'd let her do a bit of introduction herself. So, Mommy, please tell us a bit about yourself. But before then, welcome to the Eden Project with Priscilla. How
Thank
are
you
you,
very,
Mom?
thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You're most
It's a
welcome.
pleasure to be here.
We are glad to have you as well.
Thank you.
Please, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Grace Asantidua. I am a junior doctor or a specialty registrar in obstetrics and gynecology. So I'm a medical doctor by profession, as you would have surmised from that. I'm also a married woman. I'm married to a minister of religion or a pastor in the Church of Pentecost UK.
Lovely.
Thank you. We're currently based in Graceland, PIWC district, which is in the Midlands.
Oh,
I have two biological children and a number of non-biological ones, as in people that I have the privilege to mentor. So that's me in a nutshell. I think the only addition is that by God's grace, I'm also an author of a book entitled Can God Interrupt Your Life? So uh, that's me in a nutshell, I'd say.
awesome. Awesome. That's so many hats you're wearing out there.
Thank you very much.
We are privileged to have you with us this evening. Some other time we'll do a bit, we'll delve a bit into your book. But for now, I promised my viewers last week that we would talk about PCOS and would have a medical professional with that. So we'll start the ball rolling. Mommy, can you please tell us what is PCOS?
So PCOS shortly stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. And basically, it is an endocrine condition or a condition that is as a result of hormonal imbalance.
Mm,
If we're going to understand the subject of PCOS well, we need to understand what goes on in our body on a normal day-to-day basis or from the beginning of, a period to the next. So in the human body, the ovaries, which are the reproductive organs or part of the reproductive system for the female, is controlled by hormones that come from the pituitary gland, a gland that is sat in the brain. Now, when we are at the tail end of a cycle, where we've had a period, hormones that are in our system that regulate the action of this pituitary begins to go down. So I'm talking of the normal female hormones, estrogen and progesterone. They begin to go down, and that sends a message to the hypothalamus to say that you need to do something and get us produced again.
okay.
And so the hypothalamus would then send a messenger, which is what hormones really are. They are messengers.
Mm,
So they carry a message. So we send a messenger to another gland in the brain called the anterior pituitary. And then that then produces two hormones that we probably have heard of so much, FSH and LH. Now, FSH just stands for follicle stimulating hormone. And as the name would suggest, its work is to go and stimulate some follicles to work.
okay.
Now, these follicles are sat in the ovary. And so when that hormone is released, it goes to recruit about 5 to 8 follicles, which are small egg containing cysts in the ovary to start maturing. Now, the interesting thing, and I am, a Christian, so whenever I talk, God has to show in somewhere, is that God gave us a cohort of eggs in our ovaries when we were born, but not all of them mature at the same time. So every month during our menstrual cycle and during the ovarian cycle, these two cycles work hand in hand. Some of those follicles or egg containing cysts are recruited. And then the body spends its resources, as I put it, on maturing them. So as they mature, then one of those is going to become dominant and eventually will pop, releasing the egg, what we know as ovulation. The result of that ovulation goes to affect the lining of the womb. And when the lining of the womb is being readied for a pregnancy, if it does not happen, a period occurs. So you realize that what is happening in the ovary is affecting what is happening in the womb. And in an individual with PCOS, there is some disconnect between the communication from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary to the ovary. And so instead of, harnessing those 5 to 8 follicles every cycle and maturing them until one becomes a dominant follicle and pops the egg, a lot of these follicles are all sort of trying to mature at the same time. And as I put it, sometimes it then means that you are out of resources and none of them become dominant. And so we find then that the individual isn't ovulating and isn't therefore having periods. So when we talk about PCOS, it basically is a look at the endocrine disorder or the hormonal disorder that comes from the miscommunication, if I can put it that way, from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary to the ovary.
Okay, that's too much for a layman to process. But then, Dr. Grace, I would want to ask, what causes this connection? What brings about the break for to stop ovulation as it is?
So it is not known the exact cause of it. But when we look at the fact that in some ethnic groups, it is more predominant than in others, there is the thought that there might be some genetic component to it. So you would find that it tends to sort of have a run in families. So if my mom had issues with PCOS, there's a likelihood that I might have PCOS as well. And then also there is the issue of our weight and the impact on it. So sometimes an individual might have PCO, which is polycystic ovaries, and not develop the syndrome because the factors that play into the syndrome manifesting itself is not, there. And therefore they would be without the symptoms. So we do not know the exact reason why in some people there is that disconnect. But when that disconnect does exist, then there are issues that come up from it as a result of that disconnect.
All right. You said an individual might have PCO and not necessarily the syndrome. So if someone has PCO and yet does not exhibit the syndrome, then is this person also not ovulating or they get to ovulate?
So when we talk of someone having polycystic ovaries, it means that at any point in time, there are more than 12 to 20 follicles that are attempting to grow.
Okay.
So they may still be able to ovulate every now and then. But the individual with PCOS has the absence or irregularity of ovulation as a central point. And that is played into by many factors. And I've already mentioned about our weight. You would find that most individuals that express the syndrome are either overweight or obese. And that plays into it because of the way insulin, which is another hormone, affects the expression of PCOS.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Grace, I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. You mentioned that if someone has PCO, then it means there is more than 12 follicles. Is it correct then that ideally the normal number of follicles that a woman should have is 12? Or
No.
okay.
So when you are born with millions and millions of follicles.
Okay.
Each of them has a potential to develop into a full-grown ovum or egg. But as we go from childhood into puberty, a huge amount of our follicles is lost. They are made redundant. And as I explained earlier, during the course of the cycle, your body harnesses about 5 to 7 or 8 of these follicles to try and mature them. And so when you are sort of maturing 12 to 20 follicles at the same time, it's almost like a depletion of resources with not getting enough to be able to grow as it should. And so when we talk of there being 12 or 20 follicles at a time, we are talking of when we look at the ovaries on ultrasound, there shouldn't be that many at any given time.
Okay.
There should only be that few, 5 to 8, which are recruited and, growing. So if you look at it, even the 5 to 8, only one or very occasionally 2 would grow into maturity and pop. The other 5 or 6 are wasted. And so an individual who has 12 to 20 at any given time, there's a big waste of resources. And when we see that on an ultrasound scan, we say they have polycystic ovaries, but that does not necessarily mean that they have an eventual hormonal dysfunction that expresses the syndrome.
Okay. This question, my next question might be a bit weird. I have been diagnosed with PCOS, and I remember when the doctor said to me that you've got PCOS, and I was like, what is it? What is that? And then he said, you've got so many follicles, and I was like, okay, does it mean I'll be able to give birth more? So I just want to ask, if an individual has more than necessary, why then does it become impossible or difficult to ovulate?
So at the beginning, the reason why I was explaining what goes on in our body generally is so that we can understand where the dysfunction is. Your body is programmed to supply the hormones to recruit 5 to 8 eggs. In the individual where there's a disconnect, there's a lot of follicles going into sort of a semi-mature state.
Okay.
And then none of them becomes the dominant follicle to pop in what we call ovulation. So in order for the ovary to work as it should, when the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone comes in to the ovary, it should just have that cohort, 5 to 8, that is working with. The pulsing of the hormone release goes to help these follicles, mature.
Yep.
And as they are maturing, they are producing another hormone, which our body uses, that's estrogen and inhibin. Now, eventually, the dominant follicle is going to produce so much of these hormones that it goes back to tell the hypothalamus, enough. Stop the process now, so that it no longer stimulates the anterior pituitary to keep sending the FSH and LH. And then that follicle would receive a single large burst of LH, and then it would pop. When it has popped, the other follicles do not still have the same resources they had before to keep growing. So they basically are absorbed back into the body. It's the same thing that is happening this time. Instead of looking at 5 to 8 follicles, you're looking at numerous number of follicles. It's a bit like trying to water a whole garden with a cup of water. If you are putting the cup of water under a single plant, that plant will be okay.
Yeah.
Try putting that cup of water over your whole big lawn. Your resources will be depleted, and none of the grass patches is going to grow beautifully. So although it's not exactly a scientific way of expressing it, for the layman, that is a way of looking at it, in the sense that if I am overstretching my resources, none of the things that I need to achieve would work. And that is why in PCOS, although there are so many follicles, there's a struggle to fall pregnant, simply because none of the follicles get enough resources to mature and pop. What we need to fall pregnant is the mature egg, not the follicles,
Okay.
which are the immature eggs, if I can put it that way. So until we are able to mature one, then it means that pregnancy cannot take place because ovulation has not taken place.
Awesome. I get it now. So basically, the follicles are not properly matured.
No, they are.
Yeah.
If you can put it that way. So they are cysts within the ovary containing the egg, which eventually would mature and come out. But they are, for lack of a better way of explaining it, baby eggs waiting to mature.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Grace. That will lead me to my next question. I know you mentioned one symptom of PCOS, and that is being obese or weight gain. What are the other symptoms of PCOS?
So there are quite a few things that can be expressed as a result of PCOS. One of the most common is irregular periods or absent periods. So irregular periods, if you look at the normal cycle, a woman should be having a period every 21 to 35 days. That is 28 days plus or minus 7 on either side. So if, say, I'm on a 28-day cycle, I should have a period every 28 days. If I'm on a 32-day cycle, I should have one every 32 days. However, in PCOS, because ovulation is not taking place on a regular basis, periods are very infrequent. And in some individuals, periods are not, present at all. So either irregular or absent periods. Also, there is a surge or an increase in the presence of male hormones within that individual, and that expresses itself in the skin with excess body hair. Usually you would find the hair on the face, either on the upper lip, chin, sideburns, on the chest, on the lower back, on the buttock, on the legs. So, if you come from a culture where hairy legs is the thing, it might be taken as, oh, she's just a very beautiful woman. And
that's right.
We've already talked about weight gain. Also, sometimes because of the excess male hormones in the system, there can be thinning of the hair. Women, we love our hair, but sometimes as a result of PCOS, we can have thinning of the hair, and we might get even male distribution type hair where we've got receding sides, to our temples. So those are some of the things that we see. Difficulty getting pregnant or infertility is also one of the symptoms that can be seen with PCOS. What we must also understand is that you may not exhibit all these symptoms. You may exhibit just one or two, but that does not mean that PCOS is not an issue. So there are so many other medical conditions that can give these similar symptoms. We would only be able to say it's due to PCOS when we've ruled out those other things.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. Viewers, I think we've not expanded the whole topic of PCOS, and I'm not sure we can do it all today. Dr. Grace has given us so much information that I believe if you're watching us and you see these symptoms, I would want to urge you to have a medical advice. Go see your GP and let them see what the problem is. If you have irregular menstrual cycle, if you're experiencing any of the symptoms you talked about, weight gain, hair on your facials, please go see your doctor and let them diagnose you. And if you have PCOS, there is help available. If you don't have PCOS, we bless God. So next week, God willing, we'll come to you again, and I'm sure Dr. Grace will join us again next week and would expand the topic of PCOS. We have a long way to go. So please stay tuned and join us again next week. Before I sign off, I would want to say to you that if you are struggling with regards to giving birth, wherever you find yourself in your infertility journey, help is available. You are not alone, and you can beat this. God loves you, whether you've got children of your own or not. So see you again next week, and take care of yourself. Bye.